versus Felipe Sautello. Second, 25-00885, and then I have 25-00925.
Haley Fortunato on behalf of the people, Your Honor.
Dwayne Boyd, Dwayne Boyd, P79612.
Okay, today was the date that was scheduled for preliminary examination on the fleeing vehicle, police officer assault, and then a probable cause conference on delivery of controlled substance causing death. Proceed on this.
Judge, we are proceeding to examine.
No preliminary matters before you
There's
call
no
your witness?
preliminary matters, Your Honor.
You call your witness.
We would call Officer Derek Seldon.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
You can have a seat. You can state your first and last name and spell both.
My first name is Derek, P-E-R-E-K, last name Seldon, S-E-L-D-E-N.
Good morning, Officer Seldon. Thank you for being here. Can you please tell me about what you do for work?
I'm a police officer at the Lansing Police Department. Been employed with them since 2020.
Okay, and were you working on the date March 23rd, 2025?
I was.
And did you have any contact with the defendant on that day?
I did.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, how that started?
I was working road patrol for
Okay.
Lansing Police Department on that day, in the evening. And I observed a white vehicle, which I ultimately ended up attempting to stop for a traffic stop. The vehicle did not stop, so eventually, and that's where I made contact with.
Okay, can you tell me what the traffic stop was initially for? Do you recall?
The vehicle initially got my attention as it appeared to have no plate. So I started trying to catch up to it to confirm this because it was a white vehicle, ended up having a white plate, so the looked like it wasn't there.
Okay.
But while I was trying to catch up to it, I noticed the vehicle started taking a series of right turns, trying to stay out of my sight, essentially. As I got closer, the vehicle was increasing its speed more so. It ended up going through a red light to get on the highway where I observed it then doing well over the speed limit. Eventually, I did catch up to the vehicle. At that time, I could see that it had a plate, but by this point, it had been speeding. And now that I was directly behind it, my police car with lights and sirens on, it was not.
Okay, when did you turn your lights and sirens on?
As I was getting on to the eastbound I-496 ramp from Pennsylvania in Lansing.
Okay, and so you said that's in Lansing. Is that in Ingham County?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and just for clarification for me, I'm a little confused. Did you turn your lights on after the red light was ran?
Yes, so
Okay.
I can kind of explain all of it.
Sure.
At the same intersection where Pennsylvania Avenue crosses with I-496, there's another road that runs east and west just south of it, which is Mountain.
Mhm.
That's the road I initially saw the vehicle on, and as I came up to it, it took a southbound turn, then another right-hand turn to head back west. So as we're coming back up to Pennsylvania, now that we're heading west, it made a right turn. As I made the same turn a few seconds later, there's two vehicles in the travel lane stopped at a red light, and I observed the vehicle now getting on the horn, which told me that this vehicle that I was trying to stop had to go around those vehicles that were stopped at the red light because they were right up at the line of it in order to get onto the ramp where it was. The light was already lit. So at that point, I turned on my overhead lights to safely go through the intersection, start catching up to this vehicle.
Okay, and what were you wearing that day?
I was wearing my patrol uniform with my badge vest, which says Lansing.
The car that you were in, was it marked?
It was a fully marked LPD vehicle.
Okay. And so you get on the highway following the car, and then what happens?
As I come up the eastbound on ramp, trying to catch up to it, I observed that the distance in this vehicle increased. The vehicle was moving far faster than the pace of traffic. So at that point, I also turned my sirens on to safely navigate through traffic, try to catch up to this vehicle. It took me a little bit to catch up to it. I observed the vehicle then cut across the lanes of I-496 eastbound and take the exit, which leads to 127 northbound.
Okay.
Along this exit, it was one lane. I watched the vehicle pass vehicles on the exit on the shoulder in order to get past them. I continued to try to catch up with my lights and sirens. And then once we were on 127 northbound after this interchange, the vehicle suddenly slowed to the exact speed, in which case I was able to get directly behind it at this point, but the vehicle still did not pull over despite my lights and sirens.
Okay, so did the vehicle ever pull over?
Eventually, I followed the vehicle.
You're okay. I was just gonna ask about how much time elapsed do you think from when you turned on your lights and sirens to when that vehicle finally pulled over?
I was directly behind the vehicle with my lights and sirens on from 127 northbound around Kalamazoo Street until Lake Lansing Road, which is a distance of 4 or 5 miles.
Okay,
And to clarify, at that point, the vehicle did not pull over. It took the Lake Lansing exit. We came up to the red light along the exit from the off ramp, in which case I turned my sirens off and then back on to kind of re-indicate I'm trying to stop this vehicle.
okay,
I used my PA speaker to get on it and tell the vehicle to pull over or to stop. Once the light turned green, the vehicle just continued to drive and it went westbound.
do you remember exactly what you said over the PA speaker?
Not exactly, but it was along the lines of pull over.
Okay, and so did you continue following the vehicle?
I did. At this point, I realized that the vehicle more than likely was not going to stop for me. So once we were westbound on Lake Lansing, I turned my lights and sirens off. So that way, if this area is more congested with traffic, so that way I'm not confusing any traffic trying to come through or causing any accidents. I just stayed behind.
Okay, so how did the vehicle eventually pull over then?
We were traveling westbound down Lake Lansing, and I was calling this out on the radio so that way others in my jurisdiction knew. And I was also receiving some updates from dispatch, such as that East Lansing might have been looking for this vehicle. Anyways, what westbound down Lake Lansing, once we got up to Larch Street, it just pulled into the gas station at that corner.
Okay, and then what happened next?
That was 2100 North Larch, I believe. It's a mobile gas station attached to quality there. It just pulled up to a pump. And so now that the vehicle was actually stopping, I pulled in behind the vehicle and I reactivated my overhead lights in order to reinitiate. The vehicle stayed stopped at this moment. I got out and started initiating a high risk stop because of the fact that the vehicle was not stopping for me and some of the information I received from dispatch while traveling to this point, some of my partners, was that the vehicle was possibly being looked for by East Lansing because they recognized the plate and the vehicle description that I had given, and that might have been involved in an assault for it.
Okay, so you're still in Lansing then,
Yes,
Ingham County?
yes,
Did you ever have contact with the driver?
yes.
Can you tell me a bit about that?
At that point, I conducted a high risk stop, meaning I got on my vehicle rather than approaching because of the circumstances. I stayed at my vehicle. I had drawn my gun, pointed at the vehicle, but just held it at a low ready position and started giving verbal announcements to the driver to exit the vehicle. I did so with my PA system to make sure it was loud enough for the driver to hear, which it was working at the time. I gave repeated commands for the driver to exit the vehicle and he did not. Eventually, I had more officers show up to assist me. Once there were 3 or 4 police cars there, in addition, then the driver got out of the vehicle and followed my commands back to my vehicle, which was placed in custody by myself and my partner.
Okay, can you tell me, do you know approximately how much time passed from when you first ordered the driver to get out of the vehicle and when the driver did get out of the vehicle?
It'd be hard to say the exact amount of time, but it was more than, I'd say the time frame 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay. That's good, thank you. And then at that point, the driver was put under arrest?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Is he supposed to be identifying this witness?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I apologize for that. So you placed him under arrest. Would you be able to identify the defendant if you saw him here today?
Yes,
Can you point to him and describe an article of clothing that he's wearing?
you see her right there, wearing white shirt, black tie.
Thank you so much. No further questions now.
Who is the person you're identifying? Because she referred to him as a defendant. What's his name?
So Sautello,
Are you asking her? You're answering my question. Do you know his name?
Yes.
What's his name?
Sautello.
Sautello last name?
Sautello.
Okay. Cross-examination.
You've been an officer for how long?
I was hired by the city of Lansing for the academy in August 2023, and then I started with road patrol in December of 2023. So that puts me at a year and some months.
So you were trained at the academy?
Yes.
Know the importance of note taking?
Yes,
Of course, you know that details matter,
yes,
so you try to be as accurate as possible.
yes,
When you first noticed that white SUV that got your attention, in the same direction as it,
I was.
you said it was a white SUV with an all-white plate.
Yes,
This is Michigan, no blue letters, no blue numbers.
not that I could see from that point.
The only thing that caught your attention is that you thought it had no plate.
At the time that got my attention, yes.
Did you initiate your lights and siren at that time?
Not at that time.
In fact, you had to speed up just to try to confirm your suspicion, right?
Yes,
So it wasn't immediately in front of you.
it was some distance in front of me, but
You testified that your training and experience, people make right turns to evade the police or evade your detection, something like that, you said?
yes,
So had he made a left turn, it wouldn't have been suspicious?
not necessarily.
You know what a pretextual stop is?
No, sir.
Never heard that?
I have that time.
Heard the term fishing expedition?
I have not, sir.
But you'd agree with me that a turn alone isn't illegal, right?
No,
You'd also agree with me that people make turns for all sorts of reasons,
absolutely,
including heading home,
absolutely.
running errands. So you assume criminal intent based on only a turn.
I did not,
You continued to follow.
as I was still trying to catch up, sir.
And at that point, you still hadn't activated your overhead lights or your siren.
No, sir.
And once that SUV made the additional right turn, it was so far ahead of you, you still couldn't see the plates.
Correct.
And you eventually, in your report, say you lost complete sight of that SUV.
I did.
That was around the time it was getting onto the highway.
Correct.
And I think in your direct testimony, you stated 2 vehicles stopped at light, which told you that the white SUV had to go around.
Correct.
That was an assumption, right?
Suppose.
You didn't see it.
I did not see it.
And you activated your emergency lights as you were getting onto 496 off of Pennsylvania.
Before the intersection.
That ramp goes uphill.
Correct.
And because of the incline, your view of the SUV and your view of the SUV was obstructed, right?
Correct.
So at the moment you turned on your lights, it's possible that that SUV couldn't see you because of that incline, correct?
Correct.
Once you crested the highway, you could see that SUV again.
I could.
It was far ahead of you.
It was.
Traffic speeds at least 70 miles an hour.
Yes.
You don't know if the driver ever looked in his rear view, do you?
I don't.
You don't have any video, body cam, anything showing him looking back at you.
No.
So to be clear, he never made any evasive movements, right? He just continued in his direction of travel.
Correct.
And at some point in your report, you indicate that you had to go over 100 miles an hour just to catch up.
Yes.
And when you caught up, that was at the exit ramp on 127 for Lake Lansing Road.
I caught up prior to that, sir.
And that would be reflected in your dash cam, then, right?
Correct.
When did you catch up?
After merging onto 127 northbound, that's right around Kalamazoo, Michigan area on 127.
And you're positive.
Yes.
Fleeing and eluding requires that the driver willfully disobey your signal, right?
Correct.
I have no statements from Mr. Sautello saying that he admitted to fleeing and eluding.
Correct.
No evidence that he saw your sirens, saw your lights, heard your sirens.
Sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
Yes.
And you admit on this record that you didn't, you turned on that lights at some point, turned them off, turned them back on. I think at one point you were on Lake Lansing, turned them off, not to confuse other drivers.
Correct.
Lights on, off, on. Could have been confusing to Mr. Sautello, right?
Objection, Your Honor. That's speculative. There's no way for the officer to know.
If it's possible, could make that so he turned it off so that he didn't confuse other drivers.
Yes, good question.
You previously testified that you turned your lights off and your siren, not to confuse other drivers. You've also indicated that you turned your lights on and your siren off and on several times during this interaction.
I would disagree because it wasn't only
Was it
because
yes or no?
several times. No,
You say you could disagree because what?
it wasn't several times. I personally don't see how
Okay. Do you know how many times you turn your lights on and off?
I turned them off coming down the on-ramp and then back on when we hit the red light at the end of the on-ramp and then back off after he still did not stop after turning the on-ramp onto like.
So you turned them off twice
I turned them off twice.
and on 3 times.
Testified previously about this high-risk stop. You had your weapon ready. Not directly at an individual, just sort of below the line of sight. And you also testified that there were other officers involved, right?
Correct.
And Because this was a high-risk stop, other officers had their guns drawn, right?
Correct.
Not all of them had them at a low ready, isn't that right?
I cannot answer that.
Have you reviewed any body cam or dash cam from that incident?
I reviewed my body cam dash cam from the incident and wrote the report.
And you said the elapsed time from the time he was ordered out was about 2 to 3 minutes.
That's a rough estimate from my memory.
So if your body cam or dash cam showed that it was around a minute, would that be more accurate?
It would be.
Now, you gave some commands to Mr. Sautello, right?
I did.
And it's normal for people to be nervous when they have guns pointed in their direction.
Sure. Yeah.
Lots of officers involved, everyone has guns, things can go awry. You agree with that as well.
I agree that people could be nervous.
So there's things you'd like to see for officer safety, is that right?
Yes.
So you gave some verbal commands,
Correct.
voice extremely loud, you're on your PA system, right?
Correct.
You gave commands in rapid succession, isn't that right?
I'm not sure what you mean by rapid succession.
You gave lots of commands, step out of the car, put your keys out, put your
Yes.
hands up, walk backwards really fast, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Agree that someone being shouted at, may feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Especially when you got guns pointed in your direction, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, he got out of the car.
He did.
He followed every command. He walked backwards to your car with his hands up.
He did.
You successfully cuffed him without him snatching away from you.
Correct.
He didn't throw any punches.
No.
Didn't push.
No.
He didn't try to run away.
No.
You weren't injured.
No.
No weapons.
No.
Based on my understanding of your report and reviewing body cam, when you got back to the station, you made a phone call to a person that was in the vehicle with Mr. Sautello. Is that right?
Yes.
And one of the things you wanted to know was how fast that vehicle was. Is that right?
Correct.
Because you didn't know for yourself how fast.
No redirect for this witness, Your Honor.
Maybe this witness speaks to you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. So people would like to call Khalil Anderson, I believe is that, and Anton Swan. Khalil Anton, Your Honor. I apologize, Your Honor. That would be our only witness that people would be ready to move forward to argument.
Next calling witnesses today.
Sautello is being charged with fleeing and eluding in the 4th degree and resisting and obstructing officers. Today we had testimony from one witness, and that's Officer Seldon. Officer Seldon did testify that he was performing a traffic stop against the defendant in Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County on the date of March 23rd, 2025. He testified that at first he wasn't on the vehicle, but then upon getting closer to the vehicle, did observe the vehicle run a red light as well. To prove fleeing and eluding, the first element is that a police officer was in uniform and was performing his lawful duties. Officer Seldon did testify that he was in his police officer uniform and was conducting a traffic stop. He also was in a marked police car. The second element is that the defendant was driving a motor vehicle. Officer Seldon's testimony also showed that the defendant was driving a motor vehicle at that time. He did, after a bit of confusion, did eventually identify the driver as the defendant here. The officer ordered the defendant to stop the vehicle. That's the third element. The lights were on. I do believe that the officer also testified that the defendant crossed multiple lanes of traffic to evade him, as well as reached high speeds, did not. I believe the officer testified as well that this took 4 to 5 miles of following him with his lights on. That was all on the highway before the lights were ever shut off and then turned back on. Fourth is that the defendant knew of the order. It's standard procedure that if an officer has his lights and sirens on behind you, that you would pull over. Additionally,
But was the officer ever behind him? So it didn't sound like the officer was behind him.
the officer did catch up to him and was behind him, according to his testimony.
Well, my understanding is that he didn't catch up to him for some time.
Yes, but did catch up to him on the highway.
His testimony on the cross was that the driver never made any evasive movements, just continued in travel.
Also, he did testify that after the lights were turned on, that the defendant did accelerate as well as cross multiple lanes of traffic.
It's not illegal to accelerate and cross multiple lanes of travel. He was asked on cross-examination, did the defendant ever make any evasive movements on the highway? He said no. He just continued in his travel. He was never redirected to tell me anything else.
I understand, Your Honor. Would you like me to continue or?
You can continue.
Okay, and then fifth would be that the defendant refused to obey the order by trying to flee or avoid being caught. This continued even after the highway, the lights were turned off and then turned back on, and still the defendant refused to pull over. For the officer, the officer Seldon also testified that after they had gotten off the highway, he had announced on the PA that he needed the vehicle to stop. The vehicle continued to accelerate through the green light forward ahead of Officer Seldon, and this all happens after they get off the freeway. And additionally, the defendant is charged with resisting the police officer. The first element that we need to show probable cause of is that the defendant did obstruct or oppose who was a police officer. And
Let me stop you here, because maybe I'm confused. I thought that the questions to the officer was that there was a question posed on cross as to whether or not the defendant got out the car and followed every command. And he said yes.
a minute after.
A minute after what?
He first gave the commands. My understanding of the testimony was that the officer gave the commands for the defendant to get out of the vehicle. Then the defendant refused to get out of the vehicle until other officers arrived at the scene, and then the defendant got out of the vehicle. That was my understanding of the testimony.
That was not my understanding. But read the record.
Understood.
You can continue.
And there is some discrepancies about how long it was, between 1 to 3 minutes. The officer ordering the defendant to get out of the vehicle and the defendant refusing to do so. The defendant does eventually get out of the vehicle after 1 to 3 minutes pass in time. Second is that the defendant knew or had reason to know that the police officer was performing their duties at the time. The officer did testify that he was in a marked police car and in his uniform. And third is that the defendant, or that the officer gave the defendant a lawful command and was making a lawful arrest or was otherwise performing a lawful act. It was a traffic stop, and the command was for the defendant to get out of the car, which he did not respond to until 1 minute to 3 minutes passed in time until other officers arrived on the scene. And so the people would ask that you bind both of these charges over to circuit court. Thank you.
We'd object to the bind over, Judge. At best on this record, we heard that this was a pretextual stop. The only indication of any criminal activity that the officer has alleged was that Mr. Sautello made a series of right turns. He even further indicated that the alleged speeding that he claimed was the basis for a stop, he never even observed, he didn't know how fast the car was traveling, that he called an occupant of Mr. Sautello's vehicle to try to ascertain the speed. The law doesn't work backwards to manufacture a probable cause. You've heard the testimony, I think more importantly, on the resisting, obstructing, and assault. He told you that officers was on the scene. It was a high-risk stop. They had their guns. At least this officer had his guns in the low ready. That Mr. Sautello complied with all the instructions. May have taken them 1 minute, but the law allows a reasonable amount of time, especially given the gravity of those circumstances with guns being. On that basis, Judge, we'd object.
And to the people, Your Honor.
Let's see, this is a plea and eluding on the 4th degree, and then there is a police officer assault, resisting, obstructing, charges of habitual offender, second offense notice. Burden is on the prosecution to establish probable cause that a felony was committed, and then probable cause to charge you, Mrs. Sautello, with the felony. This is not a trial. They don't need to prove each element of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. We had testimony today from Officer Derek Seldon, who testified that on or about March 23rd, 2025, he was working road patrol when he observed a white vehicle and attempted a traffic stop. To this point, it's still unclear to me, why are we doing a traffic stop? I don't have anything on this record that lets me know that there was a lawful reason for a traffic stop in the first place. The officer testified that he didn't know, that he couldn't tell if it had a plate on the vehicle because the vehicle was white, and then there was some sort of glare that prevented him from seeing whether or not there was a light. I don't know what time of day this was because that was never established. I don't know if it was sunny outside because that was not established. That would have been the burden of the prosecution. But there was some glare from some place that prevented the officer from being able to actually see if there was a plate on an SUV, a white SUV, to which at some point he did get close enough to see that there was a plate. But based on a series of right turns, the officer decides that there's some criminal activity And so he continues to follow this defendant. Prosecution has made the argument that the defendant ran a light, but that's not what the testimony of the officer says. He said that he assumes that a light was. The officer has dash cam, body cam, or should have those things, and he supposedly is following this person because this person has made multiple right turns. I don't know how many right turns have been made, but nonetheless, he's made some right turns, but the officer does not see or somehow misses whether or not this vehicle actually, in fact, ran a red light. And so then the officer gets on the expressway. It was established on the cross-examination that there is some incline or hill as you enter onto the expressway. And so it's possible, based on the officer's response, that he could not, the driver of the SUV would not be able to see the officer activating his lights as he entered onto the expressway. And then by the time he had actually entered on the expressway, his testimony was that the defendant's vehicle would have been some distance ahead of him. He did testify, officer did testify that he did not, I think the question was whether or not he activated his light several times. He said he did not activate it several times, but then when I asked him, it was several times. He turned them on 3 times, turned them off twice. I don't think that this was a strong case for the prosecution to begin with, but I also don't believe that the way the facts have been presented amounts to sufficient probable cause. And I agree that this was a pretextual stop from the beginning. There's nothing on this record to even give the officer probable cause to make the stop a reason to make the stop in the first place. You can make as many right turns as you want. You can make right turns because you don't want to be around the officers for whatever reason. That's not illegal. They have to actually have a reason to stop you, and it can't be because you had a right turn and we thought maybe you didn't have a license plate, but now we see that you did have a license plate. There's insufficient evidence as to count 1, police officer fleeing, eluding, to a probable cause standard, so that's dismissed. Count 2, police officer assault, resisting, obstructing is also dismissed. I think this was a pretextual stop. I don't think the officer had reasonable grounds to make a stop in the first place. So both counts are dismissed for lack of probable cause.